right, guys, welcome back to my channel for another episode of very interesting and fun facts found around the world. Let's see, I find it very interesting how synchronicity takes place and how some of the videos that start coming across my feed seem to coincide with each other. And I want to delve further into this practice of the mud flood, into the aspect of the black magic and using the high magic specifically to induce these actions. These are the things that you and I can actually do with our minds, but because we don't have the knowledge, we are beyond some of these capabilities right now. But I have practiced with a crystal, and this is why I'm going to be hosting the Crystal Brigade. I've practiced with a crystal with dispersing clouds, for example, and I do this at the beach. I've done it at my house. I did it while I was on Walking Dead because we were outside all the time. I claim to make it rain because I've put it out there, and it's all about visualization and about your intention and making these things happen. Each one of us has a great capability to work with the element that is our main element, like our sun sign element. I believe that is our power sign, and that through the elements, we can actually manipulate the elemental forces all around us. Yes, I have kind of dabbled in this, and believe me, this is a slow, dense reality. So things don't happen right away, like, within a few seconds. They can, depending on the level of your concentration and focus and the practice that you put into this, because it's like a muscle. Anything we do with our mind is like a muscle, and it's like every other aspect of our body. So with that being said, I really suspect that there is magical practice involved with all of these events of the mud floods, because it ties in very well with the sigil magic that they make on the land, through the geomancy, through eliminating the star forts and deactivating them. By eliminating the star forts and deactivating them, by removing part of the design, this actually makes it dysfunctional. The designs are very important in the radionics, the whole concept of sigil magic and radionics, and creating a beautiful frequency. All they did was they dismantled it, which deactivated it completely, and then created their own sigils based on the buildings and the steel structures, the concrete and all that stuff, because they wanted to bring in that more septic energy. Whenever you use concrete and steel instead of natural stones, you're actually going to be using a very septic energy as opposed to a good and beautiful energy. Now, I know a lot of the buildings they basically hijacked that were already stone, but they also supposedly moved a lot of these different capital cities, and they changed them. It's just like they've changed the name. So New York, York is the York Rite, like the Scottish Rite. And so that comes from Scotland and, the English influence. So that's something that most people don't really consider, is that the names are actually influential in the practice of the magic, because all of the letters are also spelling. It's casting spells, it's magic. So I wanted to just play a little clip from this channel, and this is Conspiracy Are Us. You guys can go check out this channel if you want to find out more Tartarian information. But this one specifically I found interesting because it was once New Amsterdam, and they actually flooded a lot of this area. So let me play this clip.
Welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about land reclamation and the mud flood. Because as I've been looking into some of these early colonial period sites, both in North America and Australia, there's been some common elements that keep popping up, and one of those is after these early colonial periods, there's land reclamation that always seems to be involved, or at least a lot of times. So I'm just gonna share some of that with you. And we can start with New Amsterdam, because New York City was once New Amsterdam, and we've seen some of the maps that look like this, and this is what the Dutch colony would have looked like, at least according to this map. But during excavations they find just ruins and remnants of that colony. This was an old Dutch tavern, and they find buried walls. This wall that which belonged to that Dutch colony was 10 feet below Battery Park, and we're told that this was intentionally buried with landfill. And when you start looking into the history of New York's harbor, there's these buried ships they find as well. And the story behind it is it was intentionally buried as landfill once again. So it's just something that pops up with this site. And when you read into it, you find out that this period of increasing the amount of land started in the late 1790s. So after this Dutch period. So that's just something that's going to pop up. This land reclamation usually happens during or just after these early colonial periods. So let's go to Australia, and we're going to go down to Western Tasmania, this remote island referred to as Sarah Island in Macquarie Harbour. But this was one of those penal colonies. I believe it was one of the earliest. But when you start looking into land reclamation, the techniques employed in Australia and Britain in the 1800s, apparently those techniques that were employed for land reclamation are not well documented. Not surprising to me. But this particular island, Sarah Island, it lasted not too long, from 1822 to 1833. And it's full of ruins, fully and partially buried structures. And again, the speculation is that these structures are a lot older.
Okay, so, this is what we see continually around the world, is this notion of all of these buildings that have been pretty much destroyed. Now, I find it particularly interesting as well that all the people wore black once upon a time. Everybody was wearing black. And I feel like that's also significant because, as we know, black is tied to Saturn, is tied to the death cult. And I believe that, whoever came along influenced this type of look, and everybody looks the same. When you look at the Hyperboreans and you look at some of the Turkish and the Indians from India and all that, they have very vibrant colored clothing. So there's a vast difference between the cultures of whatever this brought this, wearing these suits. Yeah, it looks nice. It's uniform, but it's a little stale too. It's stagnant, it's stale. And nobody really considers this concept of how you found all these other colors and tribes and ancient places around the world where they still, value all these different colors as a celebratory thing and part of their heritage. But this is just another thing to think about, to add to the sauce that we're considering with cooking right now, because we're cooking up some information around the internet, and I've just made my own observations with what everybody else is sharing and putting together a few more dots. And I really suspect black magic at work with a lot of this drowning. And I'll show you why in just a moment. Okay, so I came across this other video. Who is Yahweh? Very important to know what we're dealing with. Of course, all these terms come from Hebrew, which is swindler, which is Jip, which is also swindler, which is Jew, which is swindler, which is also Jeru, which is swindler. So, and this is a warrior storm god. This guy is esoterica. He's very intellectual. He talks about different books and he talks about some magic things. He has an entirely different perspective. He's sort of philosophical with his different works that he puts out. But I found this interesting that this popped up right after I had watched that previous video that I just showed you. Now, I'm just going to play a little bit of his so that you can kind of listen to what he has to say about a warrior storm god. Very important, I think.
With Mount Sinai actually probably originally lying in that region, recall the Shasu of Seir earlier. That is to say, the northwestern Arabian Peninsula, just east of the Dead Sea. It appears that Yahweh was probably originally a warrior god, perhaps associated with raiding and women warband prophets. Further, the central manifestation of Yahweh seems to have been storms, specifically the catastrophic thunderstorms that result in the deadly flash flooding, which actually plagues that region down to this day. Petra, the same region where Yahweh may have come from, was engineered around managing just those thunderstorms. Oh, and you can see video of what those flash floods look like in that region, and they are terrifying. At some point in the late Bronze, or probably the early Iron Age, the Yahweh cult made its way into the Judean highlands, likely settling at a cult center in Shiloh. This corresponds roughly to the biblical period of the Judges. The nomadic and possibly mercantile nature, note the mention of caravans in the Song of Devorah, which is, by the way, probably the earliest text in the Hebrew Bible, of primitive Yahwehs might explain the diffusion of the cult. That is to say, it was spread through mercantile trade. This diffusion is probably overdetermined, however, especially if raiding were involved. Of course, the major historical backdrop of all of this is the Bronze Age collapse. Through the 13th century BCE, civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean experienced a cascading systems collapse. Real scary, resulting in mass migration from the Aegean, i.e. the sea peoples, imperial border regression and local hegemony collapse on the part of the various empires, especially the Egyptians.
Yeah, so again, notice how he's talking about Bronze Age. I'm like, I don't think people actually have the correct timeline. You can't go based on what the narrative has told us about the timelines. Here we are with the proper timelines, at least according to Western astrotheology. I believe Vedic is probably more on point, but what we have here, the Bronze Age is over here, guys. According to this chart, it is nowhere near where we are right now, that we are in the Iron Winter, and I do suspect that this has truth to it because of what we're seeing out in the world. Saturn is being worshipped heavily right now, and even in Brazil, they had a parade that was an ode to Satan, which is Saturn, which is the lower consciousness states of man. So they're celebrating all of this right now with the lower root aspect. That's why it's red. That's why it's the devil. It's the underworld. It's the lowest point of any kind of consciousness that resides within humanity. And since it's tied to a death cult of Saturn, that would be that you look out in the world and you see how nature is being ignored. It's being killed. There's this whole tie to all of this. But then the Bronze Age gets over here where we start coming into more of the summer of consciousness and then up to the spring. The Bronze Age will begin in Sagittarius and go through Scorpio and Libra. Between Libra and Virgo, we're going to see a return of green because we got to get into the summer again. After we go through the fall, which is, things are going to be rising in the consciousness of humankind. And then we'll just keep going around this big cycle and come back into Gemini where the golden spring begins. And that's really the most beautiful time, I believe, to be alive, where everyone is pretty much in the same aspect of their consciousness and awareness. And they're working on the same purposes, and it is more natural purpose. That is why we think that the people of the past were primitive. It's not because they were primitive. It was because they were working in balance with nature. And they embraced that aspect, which is something we should be doing. And there still are people who hold nature very valuable and close to their hearts. But most of society is out here following the narrative, following the lower aspects of consciousness, which is the material world, and craving material things that a man can make as opposed to the things that nature makes. And that's our suffering. We cause our own suffering. So it's our own demise. So this is just a little clip that I'm going to add to this video because I found it fascinating that this was caught on camera. Now, this could absolutely be a deep fake type of thing, but it is another fascinating aspect of quite possibly how the spirits are being used as employed denizens to incite things. It's just another little thing to think about with the other beings that we normally can't see that are actually being caught on camera right now. A lot of people are catching strange, anomalous things. I've seen things in my own yard I can't explain, like orange orbs in the woods. And I have a friend who keeps catching things on her Ring camera that she has on her house. And so this is just one more thing to make you go, just for consideration. I don't know whether this is fake or not. I mean, there's so many things that can be faked right now, but it's kind of interesting. So I thought I'd add it to this because it ties into the notion of powerful beings that are amongst us that could quite possibly be used to excite power around us. Let's watch.
And this is what happens. Did you see that? If we slow-mo and replay the video, you can observe what appears to be a ghostly human figure that forms right after the lightning hits the ground. It appears as if one of those supervillains from Marvel movies became a reality somehow. If you watch closely, you'll see it very clearly. It looks as if a human electrical form of some kind, and it left internet users completely baffled. Some people believe this could be a demon, a jinn, or some sort of spiritual form. Others think that this is a fake video or edited or CGI or something like that, while others joke around that this looks like Electro or some sort of Marvel supervillain. Whatever's going on here, to this day, no one knows exactly how to explain it. Is it just a coincidence, or is it something else entirely?
So that was just a little video to make you go, interesting. Are there elemental beings amongst us? I would say yes, because the evidence is there in the history, especially mythology, which most people don't consider myth as a reality or even a possibility. But I do believe that a little bit of truth is found everywhere. And if you don't believe it, it's no big deal. You can just believe or not believe. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So I also wanted to get into this thing about Grote Mandrenke. When I came across this information, and this was from me researching something else, and I mentioned this briefly. I believe it was in Leap Project's interview that I did recently with Rex Bear. I mentioned the great drowning of men, or Saint Marcellus's flood. Why do they call it Saint Marcellus? Why is it a saint, which would indicate that it's part of the Vatican? Yeah, that's an interesting name, isn't it? Possibly this magician, Magi, Saint Marcellus, created this. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, though. Let's see. Saint Marcellus's flood, or Grote Mandrenke, Low Saxon, is a Danish word, too. Great drowning of men was an intense extratropical cyclone. Here's the interesting part. Coinciding with a new moon. Why would they add that to this information? Because what I found out more recently is that with the moon energy, it's a push and pull dynamic that actually happens when you have a new moon and when you have a full moon. Full moon coming in means that it is pulling in good energy. You're pulling towards the light and positive energy. Pushing out from that full moon into a new moon means that you are pushing out this negative or dark energy, which is black magic time. So here it is. This is a little diagram that tells a whole lot in just its imagery. This is why I say symbolism is very important to learn. And if you haven't started your path of learning symbols and signs and colors and all this thing, then I would suggest you begin at some point if you're interested in having this true knowledge. Now, counterclockwise pushes out energy, and that's what this rotation is on the left. Then the clockwise is pulling in or bringing in energy. And these moon phases are what dictates this dynamic. So going towards the new moon, as you can see, it's over here on the left. This is pushing out the black magic energy. Black magic apparently is not always baneful magic. I feel like maybe it's just tied to the moon and that's why it's called black. I don't know. You know, this whole notion of yin and yang. Yin and yang isn't bad. So perhaps black magic isn't all bad magic or baneful magic. I'm learning this process because it's all coming to fruition. Now, the clockwise motion of energy pulls in energy. Is usually used for beneficial purposes. And as you can see, the full moon is over here on the right. Very important information. And I believe this is going to be necessary, especially if you're going to study magic and do the practice of magic. And magic, all it is the knowledge of spirit and spirit alchemy with the four elements. It's our innate capabilities. And I surely hope that the people who come across this video begin to actually look into this knowledge as opposed to fearing it completely, as Christians have done. The Christians, even in my town, I live in the Bible Belt of Georgia. In my town, they are freaks when it comes to anything like this. They're like, it's witchcraft, and they will completely shut down. And all it is knowledge. But they obviously have been indoctrinated with all of the black magic practice from the Vatican, the baneful magic from the Vatican, who created the three foundational religions, which is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And all of the other branches of religions stem from those three. They have created this fear and planted it very solidly in the minds of the masses, and it has done tremendous damage. All it is knowledge, and now people fear it, and it's really sad to see. And I'm hoping that at some point I can try to soften the blow with some of these people in my town just by showing them the truth behind all of this is that it is all just knowledge, and it's just like a knife, and it depends on what you do with this knowledge that determines the outcome of whether it's evil or good. And again, supposedly there's no evil or good, but I believe there is. I mean, we live in a world where it's not right to go around killing people. That's just completely wrong. And other beings, really, animals as well. But it's just, again, experiential. And I feel like this information right here is vital if you're going to start learning anything in regards to the pentagram and practicing your magic in full. So back to the Grote Mandrenke. This extratropical cyclone coincided with a new moon, which we know already now, that's for the black magic, which is, the darkness, which can be used for baneful magic, which swept across the British Isles, the Netherlands, northern Germany, and Denmark. This is huge. That's a huge storm. And so this was around January in 1362. It was the 16th of January, 1362. I feel like it's significant. And we need to look into these dates. So January 16th, according to a Gregorian calendar, would be in Capricorn from December the 21st to January 21st. And it goes actually by the moon cycles and not by the months. See, month is actually moon, month and moon. And then you have monster and money. They're all tied to the moon. That M-O-N at the beginning of those words is actually part of moon energy. It means that somebody knows the knowledge of the moon and they've been using it to their advantage. Now, this flood caused at least 25,000 deaths. That's a lot of people for, back during that time period. But we had a lot of people on the earth then. We did not repopulate the planet necessarily. It was more of they wiped out colonies of people and then rewrote history. And they went around marching around the world doing this everywhere. But it says the storm tide is also called the second St. Marcellus flood because it peaked on 16th of January, the feast day of St. Marcellus. And we'll go look at this in a minute and find out what Marcellus is about. A previous first St. Marcellus flood drowned 36,000 people. You see this? How does this happen? And this again was on January 16th of 1219. So that's a difference of 143 years, but it's on the same day. Isn't that interesting? This means it's tied to the stars, the celestial alignments, and it would be interesting to see what sort of heavenly alignments happened on those days in particular. So this is a difference of nearly 150 years. Interesting. An immense storm tide from the North Sea swept far inland from England and the Netherlands to Denmark and the German coast, breaking up islands, making parts of the mainland into islands, and wiping out entire towns and districts. These included Rungholt, said to have been located on the island of Strand in North Frisia, Ravensor Odd in East Yorkshire, and the harbor of Dunwich. The storm tide, along with others of like size in the 13th century and 14th century, played a part in the formation of the Zuiderzee and was characteristic of the unsettled and changeable weather in northern Europe at the beginning of the Little Ice Age. All of these weather anomalies, guys, I feel like they've been messing with the weather for a very, very long time, and especially what they're doing now. And perhaps this is what the Atlanteans did so long ago during Egypt's day. They quite possibly did this through the technology of the pyramids, where they harnessed the pyramid technology of, using earth frequency to create these floods, because in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, it talks about how the Atlanteans were going to create a great woe for the earth. So here we have a version online of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, and just quickly it says, "Down through the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste of the cup of death and return again in the light of life." This is reincarnation cycle. "And gradually from the kingdoms of Atlantis passed waves of consciousness that had been one with me, only to be replaced by a spawn of a lower star." This means that the consciousness was diminished. It was starting to decrease, which I feel was also during the age of Aries and Taurus. And I believe Taurus is when it actually began. And that was the initiation process of all of this darkness that we're experiencing now. "But in obedience to the law, the word of the master grew into flower. Downward into darkness turned the thoughts of the Atlanteans, until at last in his wrath," it's supposed to be his wrath, "arose from his Aguanti." This is Thotme, the dweller. So he arose from his Aguanti, the dweller. And the word has no English equivalent, but it means a state of detachment, or I would say meditation. Like he was in a state of stasis, if you would, and he was outside of his body and he was wandering around, because you can do that when you're really adept with your consciousness. So he spoke the word, which is the logos. It says that in other versions, it says he called forth the logos, or the word, the sound frequency. And he called and used this power with his voice, which normally these entities do not use their voice because they know how powerful it is. It creates through the ether. And you can do literally anything when you achieve a higher state of consciousness like these beings do. And they live for thousands of years. They do not have to die and reincarnate like you and me. So their life is not like ours. That's what these giants are, I think, that everybody's discovering the information on. "So deep in the earth's heart, the sons of Amenti heard." Now, the sons of Amenti is under the earth, and this quite possibly could be Agartha or some other city that's under the earth that we've heard amazing things about, Talos and Agartha and these places that are inside the earth. I believe they're all connected somehow, and that they try to make sure that the underworld beneath them possibly doesn't break out onto this upper plane. But with the humans interfering with the barriers, I believe that is the oil that they're sucking out of the ground purposefully. I believe that that is tied to the underworld, and that is there as a barrier to prevent the underworld from coming up above ground. And this is just my thoughts. I have not found any evidence on this. This is just kind of putting and placing pieces together. So these other Amentians heard and the call of the Logos, and through their mind, I'm sure, is the connection of how these beings communicate. And they can be anywhere in the earth and on top of the earth, above the earth, wherever. They can hear each other because they're connected to the one source of all. And they know how to use their power because it's wonderful. And you can wield this power if you just learn to meditate and stuff, which we don't have time to do, day in and day out like they do in Tibet and in places in India. That's all they do. We have to go out here and work, and it sucks because we're slaves. We've been altered. But they redirected the flower of life. They say that the flower of life is down there somewhere, and it prolongs the life of the bodies. And this burns eternally, and it changes and shifts the logos. The logos is the voice, the word, until that great fire changed its direction. Over the world then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing earth's balance, until only the temple of light was left, and that was Undal. So they were standing on the great mountain of Undal, still rising out of the water. And this was the center point of Atlantis. And if you've played the game Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where you're actually in Greece, the beginning scene of that is a very large man in stature standing with the character that you play, and they're both turned towards Atlantis with their backs to you, and you're looking over Atlantis. So, I'm telling you, these people are time travelers that put out these video games. They know stuff we do not, because there's a lot of weird stuff there. But still rising out of the water wasn't Udal, and some there who were living saved from the rush of the fountains. He changed the logos of the world and was trying to stop the great woe that the Atlanteans were delving into, for summoning things onto the earth plane. They had gotten into summoning these dark spirits and things. They are the reptilians. They have to have a human form in order to come up here. And they live deep, deep, deep underground, apparently. And our military has gotten connection with them and exchanged all of this technology with them. And that's why these UFOs are now all over the place, coming out of the earth. These people that are from Atlantis's day, they're still around, guys. I feel this. When I came across this information about the Emerald Tablets, I felt the truth in it. Now, it could be just a story like everything else. I make no claims to anything, but when you feel something, it usually is ringing a bell for you. So for me, this book really was striking me hard. Like, you got to get this book. It really resonated. I said, this is the Cliff's Notes for all of humanity. And I feel like some aspect of my consciousness has already experienced a lot of these things that are spoken of. And that's why it just keeps pouring into my vision and into my world in synchronicity. And that's another reason why my inner guide was speaking to start a channel. You know, I feel like everybody should be speaking their truth right now. And so mine was like urging me in 2020 to do this. And so that's what I'm doing. And I just want to share. I want to share everything that I come across with other people so that they can have these pieces to their puzzle and possibly use it or not. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't get paid for doing this. It's up to you ultimately. And each one of us has to decide what we feel is truth. For me, this is truth. That during the age of Taurus, right here around this midway point, is when they began sacrificing to Baal, the bull god, Taurus. Taurus is the bull. And this also signifies, because Taurus is an earth sign, this is when all of these earthly desires came around. When they began summoning these jinn, they potentially were getting information from the jinn that they needed to start changing the world if they truly wanted to reign for thousands of years. I'm sure the jinn gave them all these secrets, but again, you have to sacrifice to these jinn. You have to give them souls to add to their legions of dark armies. This is how it happens. And even Jordan Maxwell spoke about the military, like American military, and how they wear their badges on their clothes that are different color forms. And you've seen these, they're elongated, rectangular shaped, horizontal badges that are color codes. Those actually indicate different demons that the people get sacrificed to if they die in a war. And also that the military takes out their own insurance policies on their people, so they profiteer off of the deaths of these soldiers. This is how dirty and dark and corrupt the world truly is. Everybody's been profiteering off of death based on what happened with the Atlanteans. Now, they tried to stop this great woe, but you can't. I mean, ultimately, in the end, the timelines are always going to play themselves out. So through these thousands of years of going through these ages, and as you can see in Aries, Mars right here, the male sign for Mars is war. That's one of the main things about Mars. That's one of the main aspects is conflict. And then going down into Pisces, you have Jupiter energy, which is all about money and making the monetary system happen in the age of Pisces. And they're getting rich and wealthy, and they are sitting high on the hog with all of this control, laughing all the way, creating the banks, creating their slave system. They have been enjoying the fruits of our labor and treating us as less than. And all of that, we're starting to see the sunrise a little bit for us in Aquarius. But again, this is Saturnian energy. Things are still going to be rocky even as we go through Aquarius. I believe that the sun is going to shine on you and me and all the little people out here in the world for the first few hundred years. I've seen that it's 1,000 years of peace according to the I Pet Goat 3 video. And is it true? Quite possibly, because as you can see, if you're going by this chart right here, where it gets lighter and then all of a sudden it drops into darkness. I believe that this is the 1,000 years that's spoken of. Like there's a pivotal moment where it's just going to be like, oh my gosh, it's getting a little lighter. It seems like it's going to break. And then it's just going to go boom, back into darkness. Why? Because of the technology that we are embracing right now. And that technology is absolutely tied to the underworld. Saturn's energy is black, and anything colored black, or black and shiny mirrors, all this stuff, and we're using it, we're embracing it more and more, and it's only overcomplicating our lives. I don't like it. I really don't like technocracy rising around me. I don't like the new cars that are using this technology, self-driving and all that. No, I don't. I've driven in some of these cars. I don't like the way the transmissions are. It feels bad, like it's bad energy, and I do not really want to embrace that. So I'm going to try to, maintain my life around this aspect of natural means and clunky mechanical things, because at least the clunky mechanical things can't be hacked unless you add something to it that can be. But the smart technology and all this, self-driving cars and navigational systems and stuff, no, I don't think it's smart at all. I think it's quite the opposite. And that's why they call it smart, is because they always are going to do the opposite. We already know this. They are the opposing force. So they're going to make everything seem like it's benign and beneficial when it is not. Okay. Yeah, so here we are, Pope Marcellus. This is Saint Marcellus. He's no saint, as we know. These popes have all been magicians. They are black magi and white magi. Whenever they wear white, they're telling you that they know the white and the black magic. So that reminds me of a scene that was in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf and Saruman were two different types of wizards. You had Gandalf the Grey Wizard, and you had Saruman, who was the White Wizard. White Wizard knows black magic too. This is what I've learned in a lot of different occult teachings. But after a time when Gandalf was helping his friends and they came across the Balrog inside the mountain where the dwarves used to live, Gandalf sacrificed himself to fight the Balrog, and when he finally defeated the Balrog, he emerged triumphant, and he subsequently became a white wizard. But Saruman, being that he was white and he knew the black magic, he actually decided to join the forces of darkness, which was Sauron. And it's interesting that Saruman and Sauron have the same name. But here's Gandalf the Grey before he transformed, and then he became a white wizard as well, because I believe to become a white wizard, you do have to go toe-to-toe with something that could potentially destroy you completely. And by not giving up and battling the darkness within yourself as well, that this is symbolic of all of these things, and that you will emerge triumphant and you will be considered a white wizard. This is what the Pope Francis did, and Pope Benedict, and all the subsequent popes before them. They are magicians, and most people don't know it. So this is Pope Marcellus the First, and he was from January 255 to January 309. Isn't that kind of interesting? Because 16th of January 309. Let's just look at this again. This is 16th of January 1362. Remember how they added a 1 to the timeline too? What if this was just 362 and 219, 255 right here. I think there's something else to this, and that 1,000 years has been added, and this guy was probably around during those great flood events. He was the Bishop of Rome, June 308 to his death. He succeeded Marcellus after a considerable interval. Under Maxentius, he was banished from Rome in 309 on account of the tumult caused by the severity of the penances he had imposed on Christians who had lapsed under the recent persecution. He died the same year, being succeeded by Eusebius. His relics are under the altar of San Marcello al Corso in Rome. Since 1969, his feast day, traditionally kept on 16th of January, is left to local calendars and is no longer inscribed in the general Roman calendar. So here's the extratropical cyclone, sometimes called mid-latitude cyclones or wave cyclones, are low-pressure areas which, along with the anticyclones of high-pressure areas, drive the weather over much of the Earth. Extratropical cyclones are capable of producing anything from cloudiness and mild showers to severe gales, thunderstorms, blizzards, and tornadoes. That's interesting. These types of cyclones are defined as large-scale, synoptic, low-pressure weather systems that occur in the middle latitudes of the Earth. Mid-latitude. Note that. This is star lines, y'all. Not just ley lines. They are star lines. The stars never move from their points of circumnavigation around the heavens. They do not move, rise, or fall. They are in the same positions all the time. In contrast with tropical cyclones, extratropical cyclones produce rapid changes in temperature and dew point along broad lines called weather fronts and about the center of the cyclone. We know it's like a hurricane, basically. Now here we go with new moon, and it says this article has multiple issues. They want to leave out information. See new moon or disambiguation. This is probably a term used in alchemy. In astronomy, the new moon is the first lunar phase when the moon and sun have the same ecliptic longitude. At this phase, the lunar disk is not visible to the naked eye except when it is silhouetted against the sun during a solar eclipse. The original meaning of the term new moon, which is still sometimes called in calendrical, non-astronomical context, is the first visible crescent of the moon after conjunction with the sun. This thin waxing crescent is briefly and faintly visible as the moon gets lower in the western sky after sunset. The precise time and even the date of the appearance of the new moon, by this definition, will be influenced by the geographical location of the observer. The first crescent marks the beginning of the month in the Islamic calendar. See this? And in some lunisolar calendars, such as the Hebrew calendar. In the Chinese calendar, the beginning of the month is marked by the last visible crescent of a waning moon. The astronomical new moon occurs by definition at the moment of conjunction in ecliptical longitude with the sun when the moon is invisible from the earth. This moment is unique and does not depend on location, and in certain circumstances it coincides with a solar eclipse. A lunation or synodic month is the time period from one new moon to the next. At the J2000.0 epoch, the average length of a lunation is 29.53059 days, or 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 3 seconds. However, the length of any one synodic month can vary from 29.6 to 29.8 days, or 12.96 hours, due to the perturbing effects of the sun's gravity on the moon's eccentric orbit. The sun does not have a gravitational effect on the moon. The moon breathes with the center of the earth, and the moon also does not affect the tides. The center of the earth does. And if you look into the Mount Sumeru information that is provided about Hyperborea, you will find the information where the great whirlpool rises and falls. So it pushes out and pulls in this energy of the water, and it creates a huge whirlpool at the middle of the earth, which pulls and pushes the tides of the ocean, just as it seems that the earth is breathing. Interesting information. Here's what I find interesting. That was called St. Marcellus's flood, but it's also called the Bacardi flood. Bacardi flood, also known as the Second Grote Mandrenke, was a storm tide that struck the North Sea coast of North Frisia and Dithmarschen in modern-day Germany on the night between 11th and 12th of October, 1634. Now, that's really interesting because they already talked about, the two floods of Marcellus. But here's another one operating on different dates. This is 1634. The other one was in the 1300s, and the previous one was in the 1200s. This overran the dikes, and it shattered the coastline and caused thousands of deaths. 8,000 to 15,000 people drowned. That wasn't enough, so they did it. They're going to keep trying to do it over and over. Catastrophic material damage. Much of the island of Strand was washed away, forming the islands of Norstrand, Pellworm, and several Halogen. This hit the Schleswig-Holstein during a period of economic weakness. See, isn't that interesting? Economic weakness. What have we seen time and time again? Remember, 2008, we had sort of a financial collapse where a lot of people lost their jobs. And then again, with 9/11, when that happened, they had the buildings that they took down. They've been doing all of this stuff through magic practice and with the alchemy of the stars and particular time points with celestial alignments, because this is what you do. That's considered high magic, and high magic is some of the highest obtainable knowledge in this existence. And we don't have it because we've been left in the dark. But you can go out and, it'd be so much easier if we all lived together in the same town and village where we were actually practicing these things and coming together, putting the positivity back into the world. Joining hands is very powerful, and also using the same imagery and the same voice, same thought patterns together creates a waveform of energy. It's already been proven with the chanting monks and with the children who are also singing and chanting and meditating and all this stuff, where they've done experiments over in India on consciousness, and they could actually measure the wave of energy from these types of activities. So if you don't think you're a powerful being, think again. We're just not as powerful right now because we are divided on every level, and that is done by design. They did not want us to know anymore about our power that we have together with the one voice, the universe, in like mind and unison together. When we join together, we are the most powerful force in this existence, besides these other beings who will be joining us again. We became very dangerous because of all of the warring and conflict and stuff. So they stepped away, but they've been watching us and our progress from a distance, because that's what they can do. They can leave their bodies, and we can learn this too. It's called remote viewing, but we can leave our bodies behind, astral project, and go anywhere in the world and see things and know things and bring back information. People are already doing this. They've been doing it for decades and hundreds of years. A lot of people don't even try, and they have this ability. We're just so disjointed and scattered and poisoned, scattered, smothered, covered, just like the Waffle House down here in Georgia. I mean, it's sad. But knowing this stuff is the foundation of just bringing it all back into awareness, and then listening to this type of information coming about, putting two and two together and presenting it to people and saying, look, we are very, very powerful, but not individually. We don't have as much power, but each one of us is like a link in a chain, and each link is needed in order to obtain a beautiful unified world. This is what is missing, and it's going to continue to be missing until there's droves of people coming together in purpose. And I see that sort of coming about now, and especially with all of the magic information that's being released out in the population. They're really trying to heavily promote black magic in the bookstores. I've seen it with my own eyes. And I'm like, look, we just need to get the education out as quickly as possible to all the youth, because they need to know before they start delving into black magic what the magic truly is and how to be responsible with it. Because just teaching them one faction of it and the danger that it presents to their own being and their own health and everything is immense. You don't want someone going out here with ignorance, trying to summon things that they do not know anything about. And that's why I'm here. I understand all this stuff, or I understand. I comprehend all of it and the importance and necessity of bringing the awareness up to the level where people can digest it, and to help people lose the fear of even the word magic, because the moment they hear witchcraft and wizardry and sorcery and they hear all these terms, they each mean something different, but everybody thinks it's synonymous with darkness, like evil, Satan, and all of this. I'm like, this is ridiculous. When people are spouting these things, it only screams ignorance. It is the ignorance in people that needs to stop. And it's only because they are uneducated. And there's people like me who I'm trying to educate myself so that I can educate others, or at least put them on the path of educating themselves more by investigating what I talk about. Because I feel like this is very important. With all of the information that's pouring out, misleading people is what they're trying to do. And they're trying to suck more souls into their cause. And this is why Stranger Things is so popular. This is why Walking Dead is so popular. Vampire Diaries, Teen Wolf, all of these dark content shows, they're indoctrinating people's minds and they have no idea. I've tried to tell people about what I know with these things and what it's connected to. I want to elevate the consciousness. I want to help people help themselves, because this is the main thing. If you give people the tools to go out and know how to recognize the darkness first and foremost, because this is what you really have to do. This is why I've put out the videos that I have, is because people need to recognize what the darkness is, what it entails, and where it's coming from. And then to recognize the symbols that can then trigger their awareness that's out here in the world. Because the symbolism is an entirely different language that everyone on the earth needs to know. Because if you don't know symbols, you're going to be left behind and you're going to be in the dark. And there's going to be languages all around you that you are not speaking. And it's all alchemy of the spirit. Everything goes back to the spirit realm, because we are each spirits having an earthly experience. And the spirit is the magic that we are missing. The magic is our intention plus our emotions. The emotions are the driving force. It's like the gas pedal. And whatever emotions you're emitting, that is the manifester, because that's the frequency. That's like turning the radio dial into whatever you're going to manifest. And to know yourself fully and to walk in the golden light of the sun, walk the balance, walk the golden mean, the golden ratio. Very important to start learning what Aristotle had to say about walking this and practicing this manner, because you will be manifesting darkness into your world, or at least adversity, if you are practicing magic or trying to, and you're in these lower states of consciousness. If you are angry, mad, upset, and you're attacking people with your words, verbally or mentally or otherwise, you're going to manifest nothing but backlash towards yourself. And this is what I've learned just through practice. My spirit has been teaching me so many things. And it's only because I took the time to stop and question why things were happening in patterns. When all these different patterns are happening over and over constantly in your life, if you want to know how to stop them, then you stop for a moment and you acknowledge it and you go, wait a minute, I've heard about this before. I need to stop. and examine what is happening to me right now and why. I need to question why. What did I do to manifest this experience? Because you're the manifester of everything that's in your life right now. Good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. You have brought this into your world for a reason. And it's based on your consciousness and your intuition and your manifestation of emotions. The emotional states are always going to be the manifestation device. Magic is important. I've been learning how to not use emotions, and it seems cold and heartless. But at the same time, I feel like in my future incarnations, I'm going to advance very rapidly through magic and other things due to my nature of, okay, I'm learning how to balance and walk in the golden mean. I'm still learning. I am not perfect, but I have learned to try not to get into other people's drama. Because as other people are experiencing their hardships and their repetitive cycles, they are beating their head against the wall and they're trying to suck people into it like a storm. You cannot do that. You cannot participate in other people's drama if you're trying to do better for yourself. If you're participating in gossip or, taking sides with someone in regards to one faction or another, even if it has something to do with you or not, it's best to just remain emotionless and just acknowledge things. So you become more reflective and less reactive. The reactions are what manifests with the magic of the ether. The ether is water. Water is all around us everywhere. This is a water world. And it's crystalline in structure. And you are crystalline, and I am crystalline, because we all are made of water. Everything is. And the crystalline structure connects us to everything. That is what the flower of life is. And those crystalline structures spin and rotate and magnetize in different directions based on the 4 elements. That's what the Star of David is. It is not the Star of David, but most people recognize what that shape looks like. So the star tetrahedron is part of the flower of life. It's just one tiny aspect, and it holds all of the elements plus the spirit. And the spirit is the machine, the modus operandi to operate the ether. And that is you and I, and especially our voice. The sound frequency of our voice can emulate anything in this existence. And that is a very powerful force that goes unrecognized and unacknowledged in our world today. Very sad, but very true. So use your voice wisely, and especially the words, which can be swords and can attack and cut people. I do this, not intentionally sometimes, but I'm so blatantly honest with my words. I can cut people with the way I present truth. And my friends have often told me that I hurt their feelings. And I'm like, I'm just trying to be honest as possible, because I can't do anything else. And they're like, boy, that really hurt. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hurt you. They take offense to it because their emotions are still there. And they don't just reflect for a moment and go, okay, that's their perspective. I shouldn't take that personally. But people take it personally because they're still in their ego states. And this is where we have to detach from the ego. And subsequently, mine is starting to detach from other things. And it's really kind of disturbing in a way. I feel like, oh my gosh, am I becoming some sort of like non-feeling human? But I feel like it's honing me in a particular direction for when I do this magical practice, so I won't be affected, because that's what's required. For an advanced soul, you have to not be affected by emotional states around you. That's sadness. That's people dying around you. That's everything. And I feel like the empathy it's not, going away completely, but it is diminishing on a level that I'm just becoming more of an observer of life and death. Like when my cats died of old age last year, I was sad, but I wasn't overly emotional like I would have been early in my life. I comprehend it now. And I know that it was better for them to experience their own passing rather than be at my hands, at my decision, and take them to the vet and have them killed. I feel like we all came here for our own experience and our natural process of life and death. And to choose for someone who can't choose for themselves that's like taking the experience away from their soul. And I feel like it's a violation in some ways. And, I can see it both ways, where you want to end suffering, but at the same time, were they suffering? Not really, because they had all their needs taken care of. They just got to the point where they were so unable to even move. They didn't last but a few hours, and then they were gone. And I felt very grateful that I was able to honor them in their passing. And that's just a small example. And it's challenging. All of life is challenging, but I want to advance my soul. I'm hoping that my next incarnation will be something that is tied to the natural world and tied to magic, because this is the foundation of my experience here. And I want to help maintain the natural balance of the world without the technocracy and the technology to the degree that it's a poison upon the mind and the body and the soul. But that's me. And I know that I've gone off on a tangent again. I do this from time to time, but my mind is like a river. And if I don't get some things out, then it just flows on and I'm on to the next idea that comes about. So anyway, you guys can go and look up these. I will leave some of these links in the description box so you can find them. But finding all these different floods, they're tied into specific dates and time, and I believe they're all going to be tied to the new moon cycles. I feel like someone else can probably go out and find that information. As long as you can find an exact date, you can probably look back on some sort of moon calculator and figure out what these timelines involved and find the truth, because it's tied to magic. Anyway, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. So this is just a little clip that I'm going to add to this video because I found it fascinating that this was caught on camera. Now, this could absolutely be a deep fake type of thing, but it is another fascinating aspect of quite possibly how the spirits are being used as employed denizens to incite things. It's just another little thing to think about, with the other beings that we normally can't see that are actually being caught on camera right now. A lot of people are catching strange, anomalous things. I've seen things in my own yard I can't explain, like orange orbs in the woods. And I have a friend who keeps catching things on her camera her Ring camera that she has on her house. And so this is just one more thing to make you go, just for consideration. I don't know whether this is fake or not. I mean, there's so many things that can be faked right now, but it's kind of interesting. So I thought I'd add it to this because it ties into the notion of powerful beings that are amongst us that could quite possibly be used to excite power around us. Let's watch.
And this is what happens. Did you see that? If we slow-mo and replay the video, you can observe what appears to be a ghostly human figure that forms right after the lightning hits the ground. It appears as if one of those supervillains from Marvel movies became a reality somehow. If you watch closely, you'll see it very clearly. It looks as if a human electrical form of some kind, and it left internet users completely baffled. Some people believe this could be a demon, a jinn, or some sort of spiritual form. Others think that this is a fake video or edited or CGI or something like that, while others joke around that this looks like Electro or some sort of Marvel supervillain. Whatever's going on here, to this day, no one knows exactly how to explain it. Is it just a coincidence, or is it something else entirely?
So that was just a little video to make you go, interesting. Are there elemental beings amongst us? I would say yes, because the evidence is there in the history, especially mythology, which most people don't consider myth as a reality or even a possibility. But I do believe that a little bit of truth is found everywhere, and it's found wherever you find it. And if you don't believe it, it's no big deal. You can just believe or not believe. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.